Here's a recap of the second week of the Diddy trial, and I got some brief stuff to say about the first week. Not really too much, since the first week was all pretty straightforward for the most part. It's just all about violence, unfortunately. But there's a couple things there, and when it comes down to Cassie, a lot of that stuff that she says is horrible. Yet, obviously it's very believable, and imagine urinating on somebody. I'll never understand that. That's just weird as hell. And Diddy's just, oh my God, he's just something else. He's just a monster. Because you know what you do if you're gonna urinate on anybody, it's because you don't like them. Let's say you beat somebody up and whatever, they're on the ground, and you just piss all over them, that kind of shit, right? But to actually do that in like the bedroom, I think that says a lot about how he views women, just like major disrespect, and you name it. Like I can't even imagine that one. Like that's just horrible. But other than that, her stories mainly revolve around, her getting beat, drugs, and just pretty typical stuff. And well, it's horrible. And as for why certain people don't leave those situations, well, A, it could be battered wife syndrome, or B, even Stockholm syndrome. It's quite interesting. And in her case, I think it's more because, well, Diddy's just a freak, and Diddy's not going to let her leave. Just like what could this guy possibly be capable of, right? And it's one of those things. It's all based on fear, intimidation, that kind of stuff, right? And well, based on her, testimony, unfortunately, they're not going to get him with much because, of course, there's those text messages where it seems like, oh, she's so down for these freak offs. But really, let's just be real here. I mean, she just said what he wants to hear. And quite frankly, I can imagine being scared majority of the time. But other than that, that's a pretty good recap of the first week because, well, it's just all kind of the same. And, well, this is probably the weirdest Rico case I've ever seen because at the end of the day, he's not really furthering his empire with this. He does that through music and, clothes and whatever else he does. In this case, he's furthering his own perversion. But yes, I can definitely see, how Rico applies here, but this ain't the mafia. So it's kind of different. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this before. But I'm sure they'll get him on it. It definitely seems like it's heading that direction. But when it comes down to week two, we got kind of more of the same, but a little different. It's more, it's getting pretty good. I can definitely see where, well, the government's starting to go somewhere here. Was it we got Don Richards there, this Vanity Kane or something like that? I don't really know too much about him. I was never really a P Diddy fan to begin with, and thank God for that, right? But personally, I never liked her. It feels like her story checks out about violence and stuff like that, but when it comes down to money and having, an axe to grind with Diddy, well, it definitely seems that way. She's all like, well, I'm not looking for money. I'm looking for compensation, right? Well, you know, so right away, compensation, aka buddy, right? I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous. And then, we got, was it Cassie's former best friend, and, it's more of the same, unfortunately, except, Diddy's being her and stuff like that too, right? But, that's the whole thing with all this. I know they're trying to paint a picture, and well, the picture definitely painted, but he's not being charged with abuse or, domestic violence and stuff like that. So, in certain cases, I feel a lot of stuff is kind of unnecessary. But, they got to do what they got to do, right? I'm sure they'll get to the good parts, probably week 3 or 4, I would assume, where things really intensify, right? Because it doesn't really have too much to do with anything, at least for what he's charged with, right? Then we got, David, the former assistant, and well, I never want to be one of those guys. Geez, I got to clean up the hotels and, get it all situated too in the beginning. And oh my God, that'd be so gross. And I'm sure in certain cases, they probably even have to participate in certain stuff, if Diddy asked them to. And well, yeah, that's just gross. And apparently he's there, was it when they find Suge Knight at some restaurant, and he's just stripping boss. He's figuring out, well, Daisy can go shoot this guy and whatever. And well, luckily enough, Suge wasn't there anymore, right? But, after that, well, he quit, and I don't blame him on that one. Like, oh my God, almost got to feel some kind of sympathy for these people, right? Then we got, Cassie's mother. This one's an interesting take because is it extortion if they give the money back? Like, obviously he's trying to extort her for money, right? There's no question about it, but just to give it back 5 days later, that's kind of weird. And I'm sure it was still counts as extortion, but if you think about it, it's like, why would you even need 20 grand? It's just all pocket change, really, at the end of the day for him. But just to give it back, what a weird guy. I mean, why even bother? I feel like he's just trying to scare people and stuff like that. Well, I'm sure it worked. And, well, just to give it back, though, it's just bizarre. But go figure, Diddy doesn't make too much sense. And then we got the good old Punisher, right? And And Diddy's just said just some weird ass shit, bro. I don't have words for it, but oh my god, this guy is something. And just his name, right away, I'm sitting there thinking, oh god, what is he punishing, right? It just so happens it's some basketball name, really has nothing to do with anything. But, let's just say it has something to do with something, 'cause that's just hilarious, man. He's gonna punish everybody, right? But sure enough, Diddy should just be a porn director, because and actually get paid for it, right? Because apparently he loves to watch this stuff, right? And wants to be a director. Well, just go be a porn director, right? There's plenty of people that do that. I'm sure you can't necessarily get off as you're filming this stuff, but still, just instead, it's just a weirdo. Because, if that was me, I'm watching some guy bang my chick, I'm just gonna feel rage, bro. Like, I'm not watching this. I'm gonna fucking lose my mind, and I'm gonna have to destroy this person. Like, but sure enough, Diddy's just, I don't even have words, and this whole Tootsie Roll stuff, oh my god, bro. Like, Diddy's a character in the worst way possible. Like, oh my god, bro, how did this take so long to come out? But at least, it's happening, and I highly doubt he's gonna walk, but I'd be very surprised if he does. Who knows? Then we got the special agent, and, well, the guy that did the raid on his house, and well, sure enough, they found quite a bit there. But again, he's not charged with drug possession. He's not charged with having, illegal guns, these ghost guns and stuff. So I don't see why they didn't just charge him with all this other stuff too. It'd be a hell of a lot easier to get him on a bunch of stuff, right? Instead, they're just going for, this big stuff. Why not the little stuff too? Like, it's just, he'll get time either way with this little stuff, right? But sure enough, this stuff is pretty irrelevant because he's not charged with this. It's like he's charged with domestic violence, but sure enough, he isn't. So it's kind of ridiculous when you think about it. And then, we got good old George, another former assistant, and well, the guy's so scared he needed immunity, right? But at the end of the day, he's not really saying too much different from the other guy. Cleaned up the hotels, yada yada, real disgusting. He was like Diddy's drug carrier and stuff like that. I mean, he's not even really, Diddy's not even charged with drug possession and stuff like that. And I highly doubt the cops would care about him, but I guess it's better to be safe than sorry. It just seems kind of, silly that, he wants immunity because right away, well, obviously you're guilty of something, right? Otherwise, why do you need immunity, right? So it's not really looking too good for Diddy, that's for sure. His little, Empire people, right? Doesn't look too good. And then, of course, we got the last one here, who's probably the best one of all because this totally paints a picture, good old Kid Cudi, right? And this whole arson stuff is just, well, at this point, and it's obvious that Diddy wouldn't be there. I mean, let's be honest here. If we're going to do anything, we're going to get someone else to do it. Otherwise, it's just too heat score if we're there. So it's pretty obvious who did it, and just based on everything, Kitty's dating Cassie, et cetera, Diddy finds out, Diddy's enraged. Just think about it. When it comes down to, like, say, the average person, we're all going to feel something like that, right? But just so happens we're not going to go and blow up people's cars. Unless you're truly insane, right? But, I think it's pretty straightforward. When Cuddy's on there and he's talking about how, he went to meet Diddy, and Diddy's standing there with his back to him, he's looking out this big window with his arms behind his back. He's like a super villain. I could just picture it, bro. It's just, oh my God, bro. Diddy's just comical. He's just a weirdo. I don't really have anything positive to say about him. I don't think I ever did, but holy crap, man. Like, guy's just insane. And then, of course, we got, the paid protesters that, I want $20 and I wear a free puff shirt. Damn right, of course they're getting paid. And that's just comical all on its own, man. I wonder what's going to happen next for week 3 because, it's starting to get pretty good. The first week was kind of, it had its moments, but for the most part, it's all pretty similar stuff where, you just kind of tune out after a bit. But, the second week is starting to get very good. I'm sure it's going to get even better from here. So, what do you think? Do you think Diddy's going to walk? Do you think that's even a possibility? I think, worst case scenario, they'll definitely get him on prostitution. Let's say for whatever reason they can't get him on RICO, even though I'm sure they will. But let's say, worst case scenario, I think they'll at least get him on something, the prostitution, absolutely. As for, human trafficking, that's too hard to say at this point. But, we still got quite a few weeks to go. So I guess, well, we got to wait and see what's going to happen, right? But, yeah, like and subscribe for more content and take care.